Ladies and gentlemen, once again, good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar. It's an update on the European solar asset management landscape with a very strong focus on Italy. We have two great speakers, which I will introduce in a little bit. So once again, welcome. Today's agenda, a brief introduction from my side. We will talk on the latest market development, activities in the secondary market, mainly in Italy, refinancing of plants and portfolios, GSE inspections, and we will talk a little bit about the foreseeable future, what we can expect from on the asset management landscape, revamping, storage, ancillary services. I'm pretty sure you are all very curious to see what our experts expect from that. After the two presentations, there will be quite a bit of time for Q&A. So we're really looking forward to answer your questions. And then we will end the webinar. This webinar is in preparation of the Solar Asset Management Europe conference, which will be held in the Sheraton Milano, Malpensa Airport, 7th and 8th of November. Pretty sure most of you are very familiar with the conference. I think it's already the 5th edition. We expect over 350 attendees, 50 plus experts on stage with panel discussions and presentations, and we will see a lot of sponsors supporting this conference and profiling themselves and their products and services. We have created a discount code for this conference, so make sure you head to the website of the conference and use this code to get a 10% discount on the registration. I would like to thank our sponsors of this conference who have given our trust of being involved so early already. We are very happy to have them on board, and of course without them it wouldn't be possible to build these conferences and create content like this. Thank you very much, and welcome for the sponsors that are here. About Solarplaza, we are established in 2004. We are close to organizing our event number 100. Yeah, well established, I would say. Operating have been operating in over 30 countries. Yeah, everything from North America to the Far East. And we have a extensive network of 60,000 plus PV professionals that enjoy our newsletters and online content, and of course the trade missions and conferences that we organize all around the world. Some practical notes: if you have technical issues, please use the chat box that you can see on the right of your screen. If you have questions for the speakers, you can use the chat box as well, or press the questions button, and our team will take care of that, and we will address them to the speakers after the webinar in the Q&A sessions. The slides will be available afterwards. So you don't have to worry about making notes or screenshots of them. First, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Alessandro Cohen. He's managing partner and director of renewable energy at Armon Capital, based in Italy. He's an expert in the M&A and of renewables and debt advisory. Former director of renewables at Protea Group. The second speaker will be Gianluca Boccanera, Managing Director of NextEnergy Capital Italy. He has an extensive background in investment banking, already active in the renewable industry for 9 years, and basically has been active throughout the whole downstream value chain, with of course a very strong focus on financing. Yeah, very happy to have these gentlemen on board. First of all, I will give the floor to Alessandro. Alessandro, welcome. Can you hear us?
Yes, loud and clear.
Please go ahead. The floor is yours. And once again, thank you for being involved here.
Okay. Am I able now to change the
I will
slide?
give my mouse and keyboards.
Right.
And you should be able to. Oops. There we go.
Oh. Okay. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Eelco, for the introduction, and thanks to Solarplaza for organizing this interesting discussion presentation. We're very excited. I'm very excited actually because it's actually my first time I'm talking through a webinar, and it's nice because you probably have less of the pressure of presenting in front of a crowd place where everybody's staring at you, but still you have the excitement of presenting and talking through a presentation. So just a couple of words on Armon Capital. Armon Capital is a financial advisors focused on the renewable energy sector. Actually, I would say that today the renewable energy is the bulk of our activity. We've been around since 2010. We had the chance to lead the various phases of this industry. So the primary market, the development in greenfield, constructions of renewable energy assets, in particular PV, photovoltaic, and obviously the secondary market in which we are mainly active today, which is actually the main sector activity as today, as everybody knows. The primary market has dramatically decreased, although we're going to see in the presentation that still some activity going on. Okay, so let's go through the agenda just quickly. We're going to, as we said, this is going to be focused on Italy. So we're going to go through the latest market development, activities in the secondary market. And this is probably the big news and big theme of this presentation. Refinancing of portfolio. Not really big news there, but still going to touch a little bit on that. GSE inspections. I'll try to give you a kind of alternative perspective on that. And we will then I'll pass on this mic to Gianluca to give us some insight on the foreseeable future, etc. As Eelco has already explained. So latest development. So primary market is not dead and actually has a positive outlook. In 2016, we've seen 369 megawatt of new capacity be installed, with the raise from 2015, 24% more. We're reaching now the 19.3 gigawatt. We have reached at the end of 2016 19.3 gigawatt of capacity. We're on track to reach the 20 gigawatt pretty soon. And that's interesting because the outlook here looks even better. We've heard about companies, large companies like Eni, Terna, and Ferrovie Italiane, which is the Italian railways company, announcing of grid parity projects, each of 200 megawatt, that they're planning to build for themselves for the next years. And this is actually a trend, that it's a worldwide trend that is happening. We see Google, Amazon, Walmart, all these large companies making announcements on being always more and more involved in the renewable energies in general and PV in particular. And I think there's been a change in the approach where those large corporates have become the biggest allies of the industry. And still in the grid parity, if you keep on talking about grid parity, we've heard about Octopus, building some grid parity projects, so without feed-in tariff, and plans to build other. So probably the primary market outlook is definitely not as used to be in the good old times, but it still has something to say, and probably we're going to see some surprises on the upside, on the positive side. Just one last word, probably the project that have been put in place from Octopus are not pure feed tariff free, because they still have some tax benefit for the investors in the UK, but still is no formal feed-in tariff incentives. A couple of words on plant performance. So we have experiencing an increase of performance of the plants, and this is mainly due to the technical technical improvements that have been done by the various asset owners during these years. Here the trigger, as we will see during the course of the presentation, is always has been the cut of the feed-in tariff. So there was a need to improve performance, to improve the returns of the assets. In terms of irradiation, there have been a couple of years not particularly good, but 2017 irradiations look pretty good. We received some data from some of our partners, in particular Geosol, that we work with closely, showing some irradiations improvement in the this first 6 months of the year, especially due to some seasonal events. Electricity prices. Here it's an interesting one. The long-term trend is definitely a negative trend. I remember the good years when we started looking at this industry, where electricity prices modeling in the business plan were done on expectation of prices around 9 cents per kilowatt hour, in some region even higher than that. Today the reality is that we've seen prices coming down dramatically, around the 4 cents per kilowatt hour, and this is the long trend. If we look at sector data provider, they give a long-term positive outlook. Between us, the players, the operators of the market, they struggle to believe it. But as someone once put it to me, we have to believe it, because otherwise it would be a disaster. The reason, for this long-term trend is a combination of increase of capacity and obviously, the slowing of the economic activity in Italy. What else? Sector consolidation. So this is the big theme of the presentation, and it's a big theme that is going on in the sector today. We're going to talk about it in extension in the next couple of slides. Refinancing activity, as we said, it's a trend that started already 2-3 years ago, and it's still going on. GSE inspections on the rise, and we're gonna soon talk about it more in detail. Okay, so consolidation. I remember speaking at Solarplaza conference this winter in Milan, and it was just a little bit before the confirmation of the feed-in tariff cut of the so-called Spalma Incentivo, and saying that we all hoped at the time that the cut of the feed-in tariff would be revocated, but I also said that if that would be the case, the secondary market would most likely dry up, because most of the players will prefer to keep the assets instead of selling because of the high returns. In reality, what happens is that as we all know, it's basically history, that the Italian Constitutional Court confirmed the legitimacy of the cut of the feed-in tariff. And I think that there was a kind of turning point in the market. I remember, coming back from after the winter break, January, and it seemed like everybody was very keen to sell, and since then we know in this past 6 months we've seen very active market. Obviously the trend didn't really start then. It started already in 2016, but just to give you an idea, I made this table comparing the situation of the concentration of the players in 2014 as the one of today. This is more or less 2017 is more or less updated, and you can see here very clearly. In 2014, the first 10 players were representing 10% of the total market, with a total capacity of a little bit short of a gigawatt. Today is 50% higher, with the ranking of the players pretty much changed. The biggest change is probably the one, the merger between Enel Green Power and F2I. But there are also some kind of large transactions that we'll see in a second that have changed this ranking. And my point is that I am pretty sure that in 6 months from now, this table will already look dramatically different. Some of those players in this table, is not secret, are actively looking to exit the market. So I'm sure that the trend is very clear, and we'll see a lot of announces and news coming up in the next coming months. Sorry, I skipped. Okay. So in 2014, just to give you a comparison of what happened in the market, in 2014, the total value of the transactions was a little bit short of $500 million, involving 212 megawatts. In 2006, it was more than double. I'm sorry, I don't have a precise number in terms of euro value, but it's pretty clear that it has doubled in terms of size of megawatt, in terms of value, where there's a clear trend, and this is something that we're experiencing ourselves in the transaction that we are involved with prices on the rise. Prices, I'm talking about euro per megawatt, on the rise. And that's a combination of a number of factors. The first one being the fact that there are a number of new players coming into the market, and old players that after being inactive for quite some time, that have decided to participate very active and aggressively in the consolidation market. Here below some list of the most known and largest transaction in the sector. We've seen a player like Tages coming in from scratch in the market and managed to raise 100 and almost 160 megawatt, although it was done through mainly two transactions, big large transactions, but still it's very compelling, to be able to come in to the market with and grow and growing so rapidly. The catalyst. Okay, so we talk about the cut confirmation of the feed-in tariff. This has caused many of the players that were hoping of the revocation and they were waiting for it to decide to exit the market because of their decrease of their returns. Funds exit strategies. There are a number of funds that have been around for quite some time that have come to the end of their life cycle, and they are looking to exit these the sector and liquidating their funds. Low interest rate environment, not big news, but it's still a catalyst. Investors looking for returns. Pricing and demand. I would say here that as said that there's the increase of number of players. The demand has been increasing, and pricing on the rise have motivated some sellers to go ahead and sell it and decide to selling their assets. High rate of transaction failure. Very often transaction fail even at the last minute because of technical or legal constraints, and that has caused players to bid more aggressively on portfolio that they see that they don't have particular issues, and they see as easy to reach to conclusion, to closing. And obviously, the local, the Italian political and economical stability. Still, Italy is lagging the other European countries in terms of recovery, but still, there are signs of stability. Political, I'm not so sure about that, probably, but it's still it's kind of stable. Low sector risk. This is a mature sector. There is a perception of low risk also in terms of regulation risk. The cut has been done of the feed, has been confirmed. Players don't expect a lot of negative news coming from there. And as we said, the previous year has been pretty much little active, and some players are coming back to the market as today. Okay, refinancing. Refinancing, as I said, not really news here. It's a trend that started as well here during the time of, just after the cut of the feed-in tariff, the spalma incentivo, because of players, looking at increasing their returns and lowering their costs. Today, the tight spreads with the German Bund is definitely one of the catalysts. And is also the reason, historically, some of those assets have been financed in the peak of the market in 2010, 2011, where we also saw the peak of the spreads with the German bonds, and so we have contracts. So we see contracts, financing contracts, at very high interest rate. And when I say very high interest rate, we saw. we saw interest rates north than 9%, which is something, you know, really unusual, let's say. And this is also what, you know, it's all those players that are coming to knock on the door of the banks today. They see probably the paradise in comparison of what they saw in the past, because, you know, spreads are, the interest rates today are somewhere between 2 and 3.5%. And so there is a significant space to create value when you go and refinance your assets that is being financed at 8, 9, even 7%. Leverage-wise, it's been lower than at the peaks, around the 70%, 70-75%, while the ADSCR rate is pretty stable at 130, 135. New debt financing means, so we're seeing this, you know, some infrastructure debt investors coming also to Italy, and you know, we've seen some transactions going on the debt side where, you know, some players decide to refinance through the debt to debt investors, infrastructure funds, debt funds. Where, you know, the advantage here probably is the fact that it's easy and quicker to perform. Probably the cost of it's a bit higher than the one of the bank, but bank sometimes can be a bit of a headache to manage the process. Short-term lending, vendor financing. So what we've seen here is, you know, sometimes some financing institution coming in to add the bidder on M&A transactions to fill the gap of their offers to the competitors, giving some short-term lending on top of the financial debt, the senior debt. And another thing that we're seeing is vendor financing, where, you know, mainly done by the sellers, where they agree to have to be paid in some with different time frames, helping the buyer, you know, to increase the price and enhance their returns. You know, sometimes also an earn-out can be considered as kind of vendor financing. And a last one point that I personally pretty much like, and we've seen, it's the recovery of illegal interest rate. As we said, you know, there are financing contracts at very high rates. And there are some companies that are coming around offering services to those owner of those contracts, recovering their rates, because, you know, when you have 9% interest rates on your debt, on your senior debt, it is considered as illegal, as a sort of usury, and those institutions are able to claim back the payment of all the interest and the cancellation of the payment of future interest. Not many large players are using it, but we've seen, you know, smaller players, mainly family offices or sort of, you know, entrepreneurs that participate into this, using this tool as well. Okay, the last point is the GSE inspections. Here as well, we've seen a rise in terms of the inspection and the activity, where, you know, the bulk of this activity has been obviously on PV plants. If you look at the table, you know, we've seen a clear path of increasing inspection by GSE. In 2016, on a total of 1,600 completed inspections, 60% of them, which makes it almost 2/3 of the plants expected, have shown irregularity, where 1/3, almost 30%, have had confiscated either partially or totally the feed-in tariff. In terms of euro, in euro terms, we're talking about, between 2010 and 2016, the GSE was able to confiscate a total of 477 million, of which 140 million net cashed. These numbers are, they refer to the all renewable energies, not only solar, not only PV, so all the subsidized renewable energy sources. And if you look at it in perspective, we're talking about a mere 1% of the total incentives costs. So my question here, and this is where I want to give a perspective, is if we look at how much they were able to cash in, we're talking about 140 million. Does this justify this whole process? What can we expect next? An amnesty, very popular in Italy. There's been talk about this amnesty for quite some times. We've seen a kind of, very, very restricted amnesty on panels, non-certified panels, a few months ago, but probably would be worse for GSE and for all the players in the industry to sort of, kind of give a sort of amnesty in which, you pay a certain amount in exchange of getting out of all possible claims by GSE. We'll see what's going to happen there in the next months. Okay, on my side, this is it. I'm happy, available after the questions, also after the presentation, if anybody wants, to have a chat with me offline and on some of the topics that we have spoke, and I'm happy to hand it to Gianluca.
Thank you, Alessandro. Very interesting. And indeed, please remain available for the Q&A we do afterwards. So let me open up Gianluca's presentation. Gianluca, welcome once again. I will give you the control of the presentation of the slides. Please go ahead.
Okay. So hope that you can hear me, very, very well, and good afternoon, and thank you for everyone for joining this webinar. I will touch upon the last point into the agenda. So only one point, but pretty much comprehensive, and from my perspective, very, very interesting. Just a few additional words on myself before starting going to the topics. I'm, as Eelco said before, I'm the managing director of NextEnergy Capital Italy, responsible for the team that we have in Italy, and I'm within the group since the very beginning when we started our activities in 2007. NextEnergy, as probably you may know, is one of the leading investors into the renewable energy sector. We manage in this moment two main funds. The first one has invested so far in the UK more than £500 million into almost 500 megawatts of PV plants, while the second one, which is under my responsibility, was raised last year, and it worth 150 million euros, focused on the Italian secondary market. Part of the group is the sister company Wise Energy, which is one of the largest asset manager worldwide, with more than 1.5 gigawatts of PV plants under management, also involved into this technical advisory services provision. So going to the topic of discussion, I try to focus my attention and also the presentation into the possible outlook of the sector in general, but going to the specific to the specific analysis of the photovoltaic sector, starting from the general framework coming from the EU. As you may know, at the European level, we have set very challenging targets for 2050 year to maintain the increase into the temperature between 1.5 and 2 degrees Celsius compared to the pre-industrial level. And what does this mean for Italy, especially in terms of CO2 reductions? As you can see from the chart, we have a pretty challenging target to achieve. In the worst case, we would have to reduce by 80% the CO2 emission compared to where we are now, and in best case, up to 95%, which is something that if we are able to achieve would be really, a great achievement. But how can we can reach these targets? Let's see which are the strategic directives on which our government, but also the operator, has to focus on. For sure, we have to work on the fossil fuels, reducing constantly over time the use of fossil fuels in our general activities, not only in the production of energy, but in any field. And on the other hand, for sure, we have to work in reducing the consumption of energy and make our properties more efficient. We have for sure work, and this is our specific field, in increasing the share of renewable energy into the installed base capacity, and make a complete phase out from carbon and other fossil fuel type of sources. And the last point is relating to the transportation. We have to work to make the whole chain of the transportation more sustainable, and targeting the e-mobility as a standard. Having highlighted the action, the strategic directives, let's see which could be the action plan, focusing more on the production of electricity, which is, as I said, the field of our interest. Let's look at the translation of the targets that I just mentioned in terms of CO2 reduction. This would mean looking at some major studies also coming from Terna, that we should invest in additional 125 gigawatts of capacity up to 2050, and reducing the thermoelectric capacity by 40 gigawatts. And the target, also recently stated by the government, the Italian government, is to completely phase out coal-fired power plants, which is another big challenge, given that in Italy now we have around 80 gigawatts of coal plants. And out of these 125 gigawatts of new renewable energy capacity, almost more than 90% will come from just solar and wind, and this is really amazing in terms of expectation for our sector. And in addition, the gas will become shortly the modulation component, coming up in exchange of other sources of production. And as I said, by 2050, and actually the Italian government has engaged itself in achieving this target even early in 2030, and we will see if the promise will be maintained. Let's see now, how the whole landscape will change in terms of electricity demand and installed capacity. Look at these numbers. If we look at the energy demand, the projections are for an increase by more than 5 times, more than 4 times, sorry, of the production from the demand coming from the PV sector, and you can see also a big increase from the wind sector, and we'll see also the target is to completely reduce up to zero the imports of energy from other countries. And again, what does this mean in terms of installed capacity? We will see, and the projection will report now that the target is to add, looking at just the photovoltaic sector, something around 90 gigawatts of new capacity, which is amazing from my perspective. And very challenging target, which means around 2.5 gigawatts of additional capacity each year up to 2050. Which is a level that we touch upon just in the gold years of between 2009 and 2014. So probably it's we'll see if we will be able to create such an additional capacity, but if we could, for sure, it means that we will be again on the ground for installing and make new capacity connected to the grid, as we did at that time. Moving still ahead and translating this this outlook into investment, this could mean in general to invest something like between 220 and 335 billion euros up to 2050. At a pace of 9 billion euros per year, and looking at, again, just to the production facilities, this would require to invest between 80 and 100 billion euros, again around slightly below 3 billion euros each year, which is a really huge amount of money that has to be catalyzed to the Italian market. But for sure, to reach these targets, something has to change, because at the moment, as also Alessandro said, there is no space for making big investments into grid parity projects. So only few operators now are doing that, but the general context has to change. And in which respects? Let's see. For sure, the renewables has to be maintained into the priority in terms of dispatching, while starting to participate to the capacity market and also to the services into the dispatching market, which is really important. And then recently Terna launched a program to make also the renewables participating into the dispatching market, and this could also unlock the investments into storage, which is another important segment that is growing also in Italy. Another important measure would be in respect of the CEU, which is the efficient utility system, already in place, but the regulation has to be refined in order to make this system more widespread into the market, allowing to make investments into let's say self-consumption projects. Another important area for sure is to work on the on making the PPAs feasible, as the Spanish market did. As you know, in Spain it was auctioned just a few months ago 3 gigawatts of new capacity, and other 3 gigawatts will be auctioned by the end of this month. So again, the PPA could unlock again the investments on the Italian market. And the very last point is related to the electricity market, because compared to the other foreseeable sources, especially PV and wind are the less predictable sources, and if the rules will change, for sure that in the sense to allow them to adjust the production of the day before up to very close to the delivery time, for sure they could be more competitive on the market and reduce the unbalancing cost that they are now suffering. So in general, the outlook from my perspective is very positive, and probably the good time will come again for our sector, and I would expect that a new wave of investment will come again, and we are ready to be part of them. I will leave then to each of you to think about how you could contribute to this next development of the market in each of you in your specific field, because there is a lot that we can do also in terms of lobbying, and I think that the Italian market is not only now the secondary market, but has something more to say. And this is pretty much it. I'm ready to answer to any question that you may have, and again, thank you very much for the invitation, and happy, as I said, to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Gianluca. Great content there. Good to see that there's a very potentially there's a very bright future ahead of us, and if we can translate these expectations to the rest of Europe, basically we don't have to worry about our career up until our pension. So that is great. Let's look if there's any questions coming in. One is addressed to Alessandro. Any insights on bank rates and terms in the foreseeable future? I don't know how often you meet with Mr. Draghi, but maybe there's something you can say on expectations on interest rates and terms.
That's a good question. If we're talking, I guess we're talking about the interest rates that the rates that the banks are happy to lend to renewable energy, to the renewable energy sector. I think they're pretty stable. Because it's linked to the fact that there is a consolidation process. all those large player, once the the consolidation process has taken some large capacity, that they will have large capacity, they will all they probably will all refinance their portfolio. And when you come in to the bank with the 400, 500, 600, 700 megawatt of assets, you will always get good terms, I believe. So probably it's tougher for the smaller player, but definitely positive in general.
I see. Do you also see very, very big big investors like pension funds that are, in my experience, only interested in 200, 500 million plus? Do you see them entering and looking for big portfolios?
It's probably a bit early, at least in Italy, because as we saw in the ranking, the largest portfolio are still not so large. As I said, there are a couple of large transactions going on in the market, and probably the next round will be pension funds, so looking for big size ticket coming in the market. That's definitely something that it's coming. I'm not sure it's in the short term, but definitely probably in 1 or 2 years from now.
Okay, thank you. Gianluca, there's a question coming in: how to reach the 2050 targets by 2030 Italian government mandate? I'm not completely aware of the Italian targets, but can you say something about that?
Sure. This question is relating to the recent energy strategy plan launched by in conjunction between the economy ministry and the environmental ministry. This document is now under consultation. It's open for comments, and but the targets are in line with what is the general target for EU up to 2050. And as I also said during my presentation, some of them are expected to be achieved even earlier, like the complete phase out of the coal production. Again, I think that the targets are very challenging, and at the moment we don't see any specific measure still under implementation that can allow to reach these targets even in the short term. So there is a lot of work to do, and lots of also lobbying activities to do in order to unlock this enormous potential.
Okay, I see. Yeah, a question from my side. You said the Italian government is actively planning to or to maintain the dispatching priority of renewables. Personally, I don't really understand that concept, as the variable costs are obviously much lower for renewables. So how does that work, the dispatching priority?
Well, actually, to maintain the production of renewables, because as you know, in Italy, but also in other countries, sometimes there is an overcapacity, and now if you have a priority of dispatching, you are not the first source to be stopped into the production. And for renewables energy, for sure, it's pretty crucial to continue to be prioritized into the ranking of sources in order to be able to achieve the minimum level of production for the investor to obtain the returns. That's pretty crucial.
I see. So even at zero or negative prices, renewables will be dispatched with priority.
Well, yeah, it's another topic, the one of negative prices, because again, in Italy it's a pretty central point of the reform under discussion at the IGC level. The authority in charge for making regulation for the energy sector. We will see if they will allow the price to go negative, but so far there have been only one day in 2 years ago where the price went to zero compared to the German market, where this level was touched more times in the recent past.
I see. And what's the role of O&M companies in this scenario as far as assuring an optimal level of production is concerned?
Well, actually, any operator and any in any respect has to be involved and work together in order to make this investment viable, because in a context where you don't have any generous subsidy, you have to work in each specific aspect of the chain, and for sure the O&Ms, but also the EPC, the panel producers, all the actors involved throughout the chain has to work in order to make the best effort to allow the investment to be made, and the O&Ms will play a key role in maintaining then the full operation of these plants during the lifetime.
Thank you. Alessandro, question for you. I'm not sure how involved you are in other European markets, but do you see anything similar to the GSE inspection, confiscation, or retroactive cuts, other than of course the general retroactive cuts in Spain? Do you see anything similar happening in other European countries?
I'm not really in the position to answer that, but what I can say is the following: is that in Italy, because of the rapid growth and the fact that everybody was keen to connect and build the plants to be able to reach the higher level of feed. In many cases, the plants were the authorizations were done in not the most appropriate way. Let's put it this way. And unfortunately, also the fact that there is a lot of bureaucracy involved. Also, this doesn't make easy, where sometimes the regulation, the laws are not were not 100% clear. So on one side you had the pressure, on the other side you had the complication of the process, and that's put together, caused the fact that in many cases those authorizations they were not done. They were not done as they should have been done. Unfortunately, also, there have been some delinquency involved, obviously, and on the other side, the GSE, as long they say it's not true, but it's pretty clear that they have a sort of mandate to try to let's put it this way, clarify or check as many plants, as many authorization as possible. That's regarding Italy.
Yeah, maybe Eelco can add some other insight on this respect, because given that we are operating also here in the UK, we know that the Ofgem is doing something similar to what the GSE has already started since several years, because the Ofgem is the authority in charge to recognize the incentives for PV assets connected here in the UK under the incentive regime, and they are doing something similar. So going back to the plans and checking if everything is in line with the regulation, and also doing homework on the documentation in order to see if the specific plant is eligible for obtaining the incentives in place.
Yes, I see. There's a question coming in. Is there any way how asset managers can protect themselves from that? What would you advise?
Well, actually, if I can start to answer, I think that there is in this scenario there is a big opportunity that I just raised. There is a big opportunity for asset managers to be a real value-added player into the market, because even more than in the past, there will be, in this new scenario, will be crucial that there will be a very strict focus in managing these assets more than now, because you will always play with assets that has to be run at a maximum level, because otherwise you don't reach even the minimal targets in terms of returns. And in the near future, I do believe that there will be also the possibility to enlarge the scope of activities. Just to give you an idea, I would expect that the asset manager will have in the future also an internal trading desk for selling electricity, because the market component will become relevant in the future. So I would expect that this activity will be managed more proactively by the asset manager than just leave the trading of the electricity to the traders. So that's what I see. Probably I'm wrong, but I'm really optimistic in terms of the outlook, but also in terms of what we can do, and what each operator, each actor involved in any respect in this sector can do and can be part of the general picture.
Absolutely. Question I'm going to address it to both of you, starting with you, Gianluca. You both mentioned corporate PPAs, major corporates as being one of the biggest friends of the industry, and the Italian government, setting a goal of promoting PPAs, corporate PPAs. Of course, we see very, very similar things happening in here in the Netherlands, in all over Europe. And there's a lot we can learn from the developments in the United States, where, of course, this is already a very big concept. What are the what are the major barriers in the current regulatory regime? What do you expect from it, and what do we need to get out of the way? What is the recipe for a successful project like this?
Well, probably the regulations to be made more clearer and also more stable in order to have longer PPAs, because at the moment it's practically impossible to obtain a contract for selling the electricity over 2 years from any trader, and this is just because the regulation is continuing to change for the unbalancing cost, for the possibility for pricing to go below zero, and the scenario is still not clear, and it requires and is under discussion an intervention from the authority for the energy here in Italy, and we have already seen in other countries like Spain or also Portugal, where there is already now the possibility for having a long-term PPA, even up to 10 years, and probably these countries will pave the ground for other countries like Italy to be more proactive in changing the rules for traders to be able to make the contracts longer, because at the moment we are not there, and also for the possibility for adjusting the production of the day ahead. It's a mix of measure that has to be implemented in order to make the whole scenario clearer for the traders and allow them to sign long-term PPAs.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, this is going to be the final question. Alessandro, any comments from your side on corporate PPAs? Are you working on this a lot?
No, we're actually not really involved on that, but I just was making a reflection on this. A thought on this is the fact that I see also an economic obstacle here, regardless of the regulations. As we saw in the presentation, we spoke in the presentation, long-term electricity prices are going down. So I'm not so sure, if there are many players that are so keen to jump into long-term PPAs where the perspective are on the negative side. Again, this is not, an area of expertise for us, but that's the reflection I was, I had, and I shared with some colleagues in this industry.
Excellent. Yeah, let me reflect a little bit on that point. I was always skeptical about that as well. Why would you buy into a long-term deal if you see a negative pricing trends? But apparently in the Netherlands, I learned at the wind conference a couple of weeks ago that there's a major project now with a consortium of AkzoNobel, DSM, Google, and Philips. And these companies were presenting there, and they say, well, we commit to very, very high shares of renewables in our energy mix. So no matter what, we have to do it. And of course, it depends on the intensity of or the energy intensivity of the business. You can expect that the chemical companies or data companies have are more. It hits them harder if prices go up or down. But yeah, we see actually quite a few large corporates that do it well anyway, commit to long-term agreements, and also there's of course different kinds of corporate PPAs, fixed price or whatever the exchange price is, plus or minus something. So hopefully we can elaborate a bit on this during the conference in November. Gentlemen, thank you very much, both of you. I will briefly show the upcoming events we have at Solarplaza. My colleague Rick will be working on a renewable energy trade mission in Iran in September. There's a major conference on the Asian market coming up in Singapore, end of September. More related to asset management and O&M, we will go to Chile again in October, and there will be the Unlocking Solar Capital Africa conference also in October. These are the first 4 upcoming, and of course there will be the Solar Asset Management Europe conference early November. Hope to see everybody there. I can already confirm that both of the speakers from today will be there to answer some more of your questions. Electricity market will be a major topic there. We're close to confirming a great speaker on that. So basically the topics we covered today, we will elaborate on that, and the draft program should be online in the coming weeks, so please stay tuned on the website. What else is there to say? Not so much, other than there's this discount code still for the first 10 people that register for this conference. I'm very much looking forward to see you there. And once again, Gianluca, Alessandro, grazie mille. Thank you very much for being involved here.
Thank you, Eelco, and thanks everybody for participating.
The recordings will be online in the coming days. The webinar is recorded, and we'll probably write an article on it as well. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending.